Welcome to the Tennessee Titans Squad Show. Today we're discussing training camp as the Titans kick off. They are ready to get back on the field.
Tighten up. It's the Titans Squad. Sponsored by Gametime. Everything Tennessee Titans every week. Covering all the big hits and game-changing plays from the heart of Music City. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Squad up. The Titans Squad Show starts now.
Welcome to the first ever Titans Squad Show. I'm your host, Julian Minensone. Alongside me are my esteemed panel of fellow hosts. First guy right there, you know him as the host of the Locked On Titans podcast, Mr. Tyler Rowland. Tyler, first show, how we feeling?
Ready to go, man. Football is here. It's been a good summer. Can't say I didn't enjoy, but I'm ready for the football to be back. So excited to talk about it today with you guys.
Our other host needs no introduction. You know him as a two-time Pro Bowler and former Titans offensive tackle, Mr. Brad Hopkins. B-Hop, how we feeling?
Julian, Tyler, it's great to be on with you guys. And like they've already said, football is back, baby. You know, training camp sets to start off, just here in 24 hours or so when the rookies get reported and off and running we go. We'll be looking up and the regular season games will start having kicked off.
Exactly. Super exciting time here in Nashville. I wanted to reiterate that just because we are starting this Titans Squad Show, we're going to be doing it a couple times a week. That doesn't mean Tyler's Locked On Titans podcast is going away. You could still be an everydayer for that show. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe to both shows. You can get the audio wherever you get your podcasts here on the Locked On Titans podcast and the Locked On Network. It's super exciting. Just wanted to make sure that people understand that there's going to be two different types of shows where you can get all your Titans content every single day. So, super exciting. Before we get into it, I want to remind everybody that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So exciting stuff there. So without further ado, let's get into it. It's the perfect day to start a new show because the Titans are reporting to camp today. They get back on the field tomorrow. A lot of stuff happening with the team this week. Of course, you know, the big news yesterday with Will Levis electing to get season-ending shoulder surgery. As if it wasn't already officially official, it just clears the way for Cam Ward to be the starter. But I want to know from you guys, what would you like to see from Cam as he gets into his first training camp with the Titans to let you know he is ready for week one?
Well, I'll go off and start off. To me, it's not necessarily about, it's nice when he had the big day in mandatory minicamp. He goes 20 for 21, 14 straight. We're all freaking out. He's great. But really, for me, it's about the presence on the team. We're talking about a rookie quarterback who has to start week one. And I'm sorry, that's difficult in the NFL, no matter how good of a rookie quarterback you are. And I think that as long as he commands the team the right way, he feels like the leader of the team. The guys respect him. He earns the respect of his teammates. Of course, we need him to read defenses and know the playbook and execute the throws and not be behind. That stuff is self-explanatory. He's got to play good football. But for a rookie who's set to be a starter in week one, for me, it's about the leadership and the impact on the locker room. They have to believe in him, and I think that's really important. So establishing that early on, and I think he's already done a good job of doing some of that early on, the back and forth with Jeffrey Simmons, holding his own, having his teammates around throughout the summer break. I think he's he's checked the boxes so far. We can't get ahead of ourselves and get its Hall of Fame jacket ready. But at the end of the day, for me, it's just about the presence and the leader and a guy who has a lot on his shoulders, not only on the football field, but this is a guy who kind of needs to change the culture of the Titans once again into a new era of football. And that's a lot for a rookie. I think Cam can handle it, but those are the things I want to see early on before we get to, how he's progressing and things like that on the field. It's bigger than that to me early.
Yeah, Tyler, you pretty much mentioned almost all the things that I was going to say that he needed to do to establish himself as a leader is the most important thing. The intangibles of being a quarterback, that's what Brian Callahan does. He's been in this position before, drafting Joe Burrow in 2020 as the first pick of the draft. So he understands how to manage a player that's got a lot of responsibility, a lot of expectation on him for this 2025 season. So for him to understand defenses, for him to move protections, for him to, understand the adjustments that need to be made going from the college game to the pro game. These things will develop. I think he's in a great position and a great franchise to be able to do that. But it's getting yourself acclimated with the guys on the squad, the Calvin Ridleys, obviously the Van Jeffersons, the new guys that are in line, the players that are going to be blocking for him, just developing a rapport even with the other side of the football. So just getting yourself immersed in what is to be a new established culture here in Tennessee, and just kind of understanding exactly what your requirements are being the leader of this team, especially offensively, guys.
Brad, I have a question for you. Sorry about that,
Tyler.
Julian. Just from your experience, obviously being in these locker rooms and being a veteran for so long, how quickly can a rookie kind of earn that respect? Can it happen already in mandatory minicamp and in the all-season program if the veterans are around? Or does that respect really get earned during this training camp, or does it even maybe take longer into the season? How quickly can a rookie earn the respect of the locker room?
Yeah, that's a great question. And then to further that, I was drafted as a rookie in 1993 to be the starting left tackle. Now, of course, my responsibilities weren't near what Cam Ward's responsibilities are going to be. But just given the feel that you belong in that position, and for him, it's going to be super important for him to establish that rapport and that respect that leaders in that position hold as a quarterback. So it's saying the right things, it's doing the right things. It's being vocal. In most situations, Steve wasn't the most vocal guy when he finally got the reins to be the starting head coach or starting quarterback, but the way he carried himself and his accomplishments were the things that we resonated to. So, I think that it's obviously possible, because they wouldn't take that guy with the first pick of the draft that didn't feel that he had some of the minutia that it takes to be a starting quarterback in the NFL, because most starting quarterbacks are the leaders of not only your offense, but both sides of the football, your team, because they're the face of your franchise. So it won't be the easiest thing, but just how he steps, how he carries himself, how he speaks, the relationships that he develops in the locker room, how he accomplishes things on the field and gets better from day to day. That's how you can establish yourself as a leader. And I'm sure that he'll do some of those things.
It's very rare that we see a rookie quarterback, come in and he already has kind of that it factor, like right away. I mean, I don't know too many people who on their first day of the job, or too many people in any capacity, would want to trash talk Jeffrey Simmons on their first day of the job together. I mean, I think that won some major brownie points with the vets. I covered Cam for 2 years in college while he was at Washington State. I used to work for the ABC affiliate over there in Spokane, Washington. And even at that point, he won over that locker room right away. And he was one of the first guys in that locker room making money with the NIL and everything. And that's a lot. That comes with a lot of expectations. That comes with a lot of pressure. And going into a new situation, it might be hard, where a lot of people are looking at, who's this new guy coming in who thinks he's the man. And I think that he has given us really no reason, at least for me, no reason to believe that he can't be successful day one, where he's put up numbers everywhere he's gone. He's learned new systems really quickly, won over the locker room at 3 different schools and different coaches. And I think that could go a long way in winning over a locker room with a bunch of vets who have kind of been around. The thing that stuck out to me wasn't necessarily the 20 of 21, 18 straight after throwing that pick in the first day of minicamp. It was the last day of minicamp. They had a family day where all the families got to watch, and there were food trucks and people were enjoying themselves as kind of like a send-off before the break, before training camp. And Cam threw 2 picks that day. And I remember waiting 45 minutes for him to get off the field. He was the last one to leave. He was holding himself accountable, almost self-punishment running for throwing those 2 interceptions. And I think that just that alone, establishing kind of a culture like that, where you're holding yourself accountable and you're the most important position on the team, certainly pays dividends, I think, from the beginning, when you're trying to establish kind of a new winning culture with a new regime and a new GM and a fairly new head coach. I think all that kind of stuff goes a long way. Am I kind of off base on that, B-Hop?
Well, let me say this, Julian, that's a great point that you bring up, but these are the expectations of a guy that's in his position. So
yes,
the players want that. The players want him to feel this confidence to be able to yell at a veteran like Jeffrey Simmons, or at least go back and forth. Because remember, it wasn't that long ago that Jeffrey Simmons was talking about how they couldn't block him. Remember those days, Tyler?
Yeah.
So they want to have a guy that's in that position that says, hey, look, I belong here. this is a position that I'm going to take control of, and you guys will respect me. Because if he doesn't have that kind of personality, if he doesn't have that kind of moxie, that kind of confidence, it'll show. And that will be viewed as a liability by the guys that are playing with him, whether he's throwing you the football or you're blocking for him.
Yep.
So he's got to have that feel.
Can't have somebody who melts down in the big moments or can't kind of handle that. And listen, we don't get to see absolutely everything going on, but I've seen a recent Titans quarterback who, when things start kind of going downhill, doesn't really pull them out of that funk, kind of contributes more to things rolling downhill. So having a guy who you can kind of count on to do that. And one thing that popped up in my mind as we're talking about this stuff with Cam Ward and Julian, you got the Kobe Bryant picture behind you, my favorite athlete of all time as well, who was known as a maniacal worker, a guy who would not stop. And I know that Brian Callahan has talked about, hey, Cam, it's a long season. Make sure that you pace yourself here. You're coming out of college. It's hard. But at the end of the day, when we're talking about a new era of Titans football, which is really what this needs to be, and a new culture going forward with Cam Ward, I think it's not a bad thing to have a guy who is obsessive, a guy who is so driven. I'm going to be there every day. I'm working every day. I don't take breaks, because I would rather have that than have the leader of your new era, be the other way. I would rather have to have a guy who I have to say, hey, man, let's just take a break for a second from the work, just relax, than a guy who I'm having to pull into the facility. So to me, it's like you can't always have it perfect in life. And if I'm going to get a new leader of a new era of Titans football, hopefully, I'd rather have a guy who is a maniacal, obsessive worker, which is a lot of the times at high levels of professional football, professional sports, and high levels of any industry. You kind of do got to be a little bit of an obsessive, crazy, maniacal person sometimes to reach the heights of the heights. So I personally see it as a wonderful thing. Maybe it's I'm Kobe Bryant coded, as the kids would say. But I think it's fantastic that Cam Ward has been so driven and so obsessed with getting it right, because that matters to his teammates, like B-Hop is saying.
Well, you've got to have that real quick, Jillian, before I give it back to you. You've got to have that initiative to do it yourself without being told. Nobody had to tell Kobe Bryant to get in there and get yourself 500 free throws. Nobody had to tell Michael Jordan, LeBron James. I'm using basketball analogies because Julian's got the cool picture on his wall. But the point is, to be great, no one had to tell you to be great. Somehow it's within you. You know what I mean? So for him, like you mentioned, Julian wanted to get a few sound bites from him, after practice, and how much time he was spending on rectifying what he felt was a situation. That's what you want to see. If you make a mistake, that's fine, because we're all human. But you've got to show that you've got a plan, or at least a process in place, to go ahead and make sure that whatever you did wrong doesn't happen again.
Everybody else wants to know that you're working as hard as they are, and that you're willing to give as much as
more
they'll
so
give.
Tyler, more so. You're the quarterback. You've got to be the first guy in the building. You better be the last guy leaving. If they see you as the first guy in the parking lot, they're like, oh, whoa, what's going on here, man? Your responsibilities are way more than ours. You need to be putting in more hours. Or your car should be the first one that's seen in the parking lot. So that way people know that you're already putting the work in to be our leader.
I was just going to say, Cam said his favorite athlete is indeed Kobe Bryant. So that all checks out.
Shocker.
Real quickly, before we hit to a break, the Titans have Brandon Allen and Tim Boyle behind Cam Ward right now. Are you comfortable with that as QB2? And if so, or if not, I should say, who do you think maybe they should go after or target or kind of look at? Because there is a school of thought out there, and I think it's the craziest thing, that, if Cam Ward, something happens to him, God forbid, pack your bags on the season. We don't care who wins those games anyway, or care about winning those games in the first place. But I'm thinking, if you're trying to establish the winning culture like you guys are talking about, you think the Chiefs are packing it in if Patrick Mahomes gets hurt? No, they're going to try to win those games. Not to mention, you think Brian Callahan, a brand new head coach, you kind of have to see what you have in him. I would like to field the best football team possible to see what I have in him as a head coach. Not to mention the receivers like Chimere Dike and Elic Ayomanor, guys you want to develop. You need to have the best quarterback possible. So what do you guys think about the QB2 spot right now?
Okay, let's be clear, though. If Patrick Mahomes goes down and Gardner Minshew comes in, they're in trouble. So that's just a fact. And you're talking about two dudes that, in Brandon Allen, this is his 6th stop in the National Football League. For Tim Boyle, this is his 8th stop. And there's a reason why they've been on so many different teams. So even though this is a very good scheming team with Brian Callahan, we know what his success can look like when he's got the most talented players available to him on the field. Hey man, it's a hard road to hoe when you don't have the most talented players at the key position like quarterback. So I'm not going to say just pack up camp and count on next year, but they at least have the fact that they have a rookie expected to start going for them, because everybody knows that there's going to be some adjustments that need to be made. All that stuff that comes along with a young player trying to get himself acclimated. Nobody expects the Titans in this current situation to win the division. That might be a lofty goal and some hopes for a lot of Titans fans. But the reality is you got a young guy that's trying to get himself used to the system that he's going to be running for, obviously most of his beginning of his career anyway. And if he goes down, yeah, you better start running the football.
Listen, I gotta be the one, Julian. And one thing that I'm sure everyone will learn about me during the squad shows is I'm not afraid to tell you that I am that guy. I am the one. No, you don't go out and get another veteran quarterback. You don't go out and get somebody like Carson Wentz or something like that, because here's a reality, I think. We talk about fielding the best team possible. Well, no matter who is out there at backup quarterback right now, unless the Titans make a trade, which I don't think they're at their life cycle as a team to be trading for backup quarterbacks. I think that's maybe next year or a year down the road to really secure that. But I think this year you're not going to get a great look at the wide receivers that you want and all these other guys, no matter who you go get in backup quarterback right now. So I know the players in the locker room and Brian Callahan, who's coaching for his career and, his job and all of that, I'm sure they would tell you, no, we want to have the best backup possible. But I go back to the Cincinnati Bengals, where Brian Callahan was from when Joe Burrow got hurt his rookie year. They didn't, go out and get the best backup they could. They had a guy like Brandon Allen, who's a good teacher, who's 2-8 in his 10 starts in his career. That Will Levis has more career passing yards than Brandon Allen, and he's in his 30s. This guy is a coach in the locker room. That's what he's doing. He is coaching. So for me, I would rather the Titans, like the Bengals, they ended up with a top 5 pick and could have had Jamar Chase or Penei Sewell. If Cam Ward gets hurt, all that matters for me this year is Cam Ward's development. And if Cam Ward looks good, but he happens to miss some games, I don't want the Titans. And the reality is what we're weighing is about 5 or 6 draft positions and 2 wins. 2 wins with Carson Wentz or some random backup may make me feel happy on a Sunday, but I think the 5 draft slots would actually be more important to the Titans when they need a high-level edge one, and there's a really good edge class coming, or a couple of quarterbacks that they could make a trade for and get big-time capital to keep building the team. I just think when you really go to the end of the path in both of those in the conversation, the path that could really help the Titans more long-term is for them to have a lesser backup who's really there to mentor Cam Ward. And if he goes down, might as well lose those games.
No, I'm here. I hear you, Tyler. I know a lot of people have been split since Will Levis obviously announced that he would be getting shoulder surgery.
I get it. I get the other side. I do, but that's how I feel, and I'm sticking with it.
Well, speaking of draft picks, we're going to talk about a couple of those, especially in the receiver room with Chimere Dike, Elic Ayomanor, and that crowded wide receiver room that the Titans have. Keep it locked here on Locked On Titans after the quick break. All right, guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Now, Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Now, unlike the usual pill that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. Now, if traditional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. All right, guys, we're back and talking about the wide receiver room, one of the more intriguing position battles in all of camp. You have Calvin Ridley, who seems pretty re-energized with a brand new quarterback, at least to me. You brought in Tyler Lockett, Van Jefferson, some veteran guys. You drafted Chimere Dike, Elic Ayomanor, 2 young rookies that a lot of people are excited about. But then after that, it kind of seems a little bit of a question mark. Tyler, I know you've covered this on your show before. Where do you think the Titans go for those kind of back-end receiver spots? You have Xavier Restrepo, Treylon Burks, amongst others.
Yeah, I think you need to go young. I think at this point you need guys who fit the timeline, and you have 3 veterans at the top, and Calvin Ridley and Van Jefferson and Tyler Lockett, who I think that's enough veteran talent. The other 3 spots, maybe 4 spots, depending on how the math works out on the roster. I think you need to fill that with the young guys. Now, Burks is a guy who I think he's had his opportunities, and at this point, I don't see a big breakout or a big jump coming for Treylon Burks. I think he's close to who he is, and you know what we're going to get for him, and I think he's had his chances. So I think even a guy like Burks, I would move on. I wouldn't give a spot to Burks over a guy like an Ayomanor or Chimere Dike, or even a guy like Xavier Restrepo, who I think can instantly have better chemistry, and he may just be a role player for the Titans and not some high-level starter all the time. But the Titans have been looking for that slot-only passing down guy since Adam Humphries and Nick Williams dropping the pass in Buffalo, and then you go to Kyle Phillips for a few years. Like, the Titans have been desperately looking for that style of guy to be at the end of the wide receiver group. So I think you have to go young. I would probably go with 6 wide receivers because I value the trenches more. I'd rather have a 4th tight end. I'd rather have a 9th offensive lineman. And, honestly, Brad, I'd love to get your take on whether you think you need 9 offensive linemen or how much you might need in a group when you make that final roster. But I would rather go with other spots, I think, with numbers, and keep wide receiver at 6 and just bring Ayomanor, Dike, Restrepo with the 3 veterans we talked about. Maybe they want to slide Bryce Oliver in there, an undrafted guy who's probably earned it and seems to be a favorite of the coaching staff. I can live with that if they go with only 3 running backs, but it's got to be all the young guys like James Prochet, Colton Dow, even Jaquan Jackson in his 2nd year. I think it's time to move forward. Those guys had their chances and didn't take the opportunity.
Well, the reality is, fellas, that the proof is in the pudding, and that's what will make the squad. And also how Callie decides to stretch the field this year. Is he going to be a guy that's going to use a vertical threat, or is he going to balance out the offense, incorporating more of Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears, even in the pass game, using more play action type stuff like that to be less predictable for defensive coordinators. But at the end of the day, you all know this, whoever is actually stepping up and making the plays in training camp will get the most attention, will get the most, respect. Now, if you're talking about sheer numbers and it comes down to that, they're not going to keep, 10, 13 receivers. They're just not going to do that. But youth totally depends on how this youth is acclimating itself to the system. If they're out there making mistakes and dropping balls, and guess what? You'll see a veteran slide into those spots. Treylon Burks isn't even healthy right now, healthy enough to say, hey, look, I'm going to definitely legitimately fight for a position. But if he shows vast improvement from the past couple of seasons after being the 1st-round pick in 2022, guess what? He makes the roster. But that's up to him. Now, the advantage he has is what? He's been here. He's at least, had a couple of seasons under Callie's system to understand a little bit of what his dialogue is, how he likes to do things. He's got a great rapport with players. Even when we had first-year quarterbacks and receivers like Calvin Ridley come in and say, hey, man, this dude is the most talented guy on the roster when he's healthy, these things can both be true. Now, they didn't exercise his 5th-year option for a reason, because he hasn't shown or lived up to the expectation of being the first pick in the draft. But you're talking about Elic and Chimere and these kind of guys that actually have an opportunity as 4th-round picks. I understand developing the middle of that draft class is super important, but it's going to show itself. At the end of the day, they're not going to say, because we spent a 4th-round pick on you, we're going to keep you. There's no automatics at all. It's whoever shows up, whoever's the most consistent, whoever else shows themselves to be the most productive player in this offense are going to be the ones that make the roster. Now, real quick, you mentioned offensive line. I'm not trying to jump ship into something else other than that, but if I can throw this out there, the numbers, that's all I wanted to mention. Guys hate starting in like in training camp, the starters will be on the field, and then they'll go ahead and sit down and take a break, right? Now, we know that offensive line is not a position that rotates, okay? So those guys are going to be on the field, and they stay on the field. But in training camp, you want to be able to take a break, man. Let the twos do what they need to do. So if you're down to nine linemen, that means somebody's got to play the first snaps, the first reps, and the second reps, man. That guy's going to be mad, you know what I mean? And they've got veterans this year between Dan Moore, Kevin Zeitler, obviously Lloyd Cushenberry, who might be on the pup. They've got to manage his minutes and whatever else. But the younger guys, sure, you expect them to be on the field, but they got some veterans, man, that need that veteran type training camp so where they can last an entire 18 weeks.
Yeah, they added a bunch of vets right there in free agency. I remember when they hit Ali Udo and Sam Mustapher and Brandon Jamies all in one streak, came out in one release. Like, we're signing these 3 vets. They got, 80 some combined games of starting experience in the NFL. They did not want to have only young guys in that battle for the offensive line this year. You can't afford it with Cam Ward at quarterback. Can't let what happened last year happen again, or any young quarterback is going to have struggles. No matter how good their wide receivers are as well, or how much the young wide receivers pop, you still got to have time to throw it to them.
Mm-hmm. What do you guys make of Restrepo? Because, Brad, you talked about proof is in the pudding, right? And obviously he was Cam's teammate in Miami, and that's what I think he's become a fan favorite because of that. And Cam really pushed for him to get the chance to try out for the team. But he had a team high 11 catches in the offseason practices out of the receivers. So when you talk about not just being Cam's buddy and how long of a way that goes, but the numbers, at least in the camp, are there. Does that kind of bode well for somebody like that, kind of a leg up on the competition from the rest of the wide receiver room if you're in Restrepo's case?
That's why he's here. 1,000%. That's why he's here, because he has a rapport that's already been developed with him, even though they're both in college and they're running a college style system or whatever. The reason why you saw him get the most attention is why? Because he's most familiar to the quarterback. Yeah. And what do you tend to do when you haven't developed the habits that you're going to have moving forward? You tend to fall back on what you're good at or who you're good with. And that's one of the reasons why he advocated for Xavier to get into this camp and show his worth. Sure, he was undrafted. We understand that. And they did spend some equity on getting a couple of other receivers in the mix. But the one thing that he does have as an advantage over those guys is that they don't know him like Xavier does. You see, and that's going to be a big difference. Now, I don't expect him to go in there and all of a sudden get the kind of attention that he needs to have, or the kind of rapport that he needs to have with Calvin Ridley. Even with Tyler Lockett, the guys are going to be starting in those roles, right? But you can totally see in a backup type situation, someone that also understands. Look, we're talking about Cam Ward understanding Xavier. Xavier understands Cam Ward better than any receiver on this roster right now. That's just a fact, because they have time together. They've got sweat equity on the field together, and they're learning how to be pros together. So that's probably one of the reasons why you see this connection that's already been established before they even heard their names called by Roger Goodell.
That really is his Robin. Like, that really is his Robin. They go everywhere together. These videos they're posted on YouTube, Cam Ward's YouTube, and he's always there. They're arguing back. It's like little brother, big brother type activity. But I want to point out too, and Julian obviously being there, Xavier Restrepo was catching passes from other quarterbacks as well. And I think that's something that we should know is, he has this chemistry with Cam Ward, but Tim Boyle is connecting with him. Brandon Allen's connecting with him. He led the second day of mandatory minicamp with 10 catches. I think Jim Wyatt put in one of his articles. So this is a guy who's making an impact with other quarterbacks as well, not just Cam Ward. And I think that bodes well for him going forward. And it makes you wonder, can a guy like that make the roster in a back-end role where he's pass only? And I think the question is, how good of a punt returner can Xavier Restrepo be? Can he do that? He was so important in college, didn't have to do it a ton. Can he do that? Because I think he's going to make the team personally. That's my prediction at this time. We'll see how training camp plays out. But I think it would be kind of hard to keep him if he didn't do anything on special teams. And I think at his size and speed, it wouldn't really make sense for him to be on coverage units and stuff like that. It might be difficult for him to be successful there. So he's really going to have to find a way to either jump up the depth chart quickly, or he's going to have to find a way to contribute on special teams, be the backup punt returner at least in some way to really solidify his roster spot. But it's hard to see him not making the team at this point, in my opinion.
Real quick, guys, before we move on, there was another college free agent that came in and made a name for himself, and his name was Nick Westbrook-Akine. He led the Titans in receiving last year. So if you want to talk about guys that didn't necessarily get the draft recognition, but then came in and made an immediate impact, or at least an impact on an offense, this was our leading receiver last year. So you can definitely see how they can somehow, even though they at the bottom of the rung seemingly can make the strides and make the adjustments necessary for them to make a roster.
Great point, fellas. All right. Well, after the break, we're going to talk about the other side of the ball, the defense, and maybe one of the more concerning bits of news yesterday that cornerback L'Jarius Sneed is expected to start camp on the PUP list. I know a lot of fans have opinions about that. We're going to talk about that here on the other side of the break. All righty. Well, workplace stress is at an all-time high. 61% of the global workforce is reporting higher than normal stress levels. This summer is the perfect time to take small steps to focus on your wellness and manage the challenges that come in with your work day. Of course, most of us can't just quit our jobs or take endless vacations, but we can start small, whether it's getting outside for a few minutes, adding movement into your day, or talking to someone who can help navigate your life's challenges. That's where Betterhelp comes in. Now, the flexibility of online therapy makes it easier to fit in sessions if you're trying to schedule that or schedule appointments, especially when you have a busy schedule, no matter where you are. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, Betterhelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Unwind from work with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/locked-on. All right, guys. Now we're going to talk about the defense now. And yesterday it was reported that cornerback L'Jarius Sneed is expected to start camp on the PUP list, the physically unable to perform list. So he can't practice. He could be around the facility. He could do meetings and all that stuff, but not actually get into practice yet. Concerning, obviously, because he's been dealing with that lingering quad injury for a while now, on top of some of the off-the-field issues. How paramount is this for the Titans? Because to me, they don't have a number one corner right now on the roster other than him at full health. I like Jarvis Brownlee. I really do. I think he had to kind of learn by jumping into the deep end of the pool last year. But I wouldn't want him, at least right now, as the guy defending the Jamar Chases of the world or the number one receivers on the other team. So where do you put this as far as level of concern for the Titans with Sneed starting camp on the PUP list?
Tyler?
I mean, I think the concern level is high, and it's not even necessarily because of the top. I think Roger McCreary has turned in one of the top 10 slot cornerbacks in the NFL. He's an underrated player that not a lot of people understand how good he is relative to the rest of the people at his position in the league. I think Jarvis Brownlee Jr. had some great moments last year, but he also had some rookie learning moments, which I think at cornerback, it's just such a difficult position to play that you're going to have that. But I think Jarvis Brownlee Jr., even if he takes a step forward, is still just a good corner. I agree with you. It's not like Jarvis Brownlee Jr. taking a logical step forward is going to turn him into a lockdown number one corner. And again, those positions are good. Darrell Baker played very well. Denard Wilson really has a great handle on secondary play. He has his entire career. That's what he does best. So he's going to get good stuff out of backup secondary players like a Darrell Baker, who was a castaway from the Colts secondary who was not good last year. So it's funny how that works out. So I think they could make it work. The problem is behind that, you have, 7, 8 undrafted free agent corners. You have a 30-year-old veteran in Arwurier who, has been around the league. I don't think he's a starting level player. So they don't have great depth at the back end. They're really searching for who their depth is going to be at that position. If Sneed is not there and not at the level that they paid him to be, it turns their cornerback group from pretty solid with him, pretty good with him, where everyone's slotted properly, to, wow, this is one of the worst cornerback rooms in the league because McCreary may have to go back outside at some point. I think Jarvis Brownlee Jr. is more slotted for the slot. You know what I mean? He even said that he saw himself as a nickel coming out of college because of his feistiness and his ability to play against the run and being inside and the physicality that requires. So McCreary is truly a slot. We've seen that throughout his career. He does not play well on the outside. And Jarvis Brownlee Jr. might be more of a slot who's playing outside right now as well. So if those guys become the top two, it just makes it difficult to match up with people long-term throughout the season.
Yeah, I think it's hugely important, the situation of him being on the PUP. Now, it wasn't but in the end of last month where we heard our colleague Buck Rising reporting that he was, healthy and ready to get back on the field. This is his own words, right? So that maybe there's just a management type situation. They don't want to do too much and push the issue or push the envelope until it's necessary for him to be there. But depth is a huge issue. Daryl Baker started out his career just injury riddled when he was in Arizona. Then he goes to a couple of other teams before he finds himself here. At least Jarvis Brownlee Jr. at that right cornerback spot has established himself a little bit as, someone that you can rely on. But other than that, Amani, maybe you'll see the most committed Amani since he just got married this offseason. It's a different focus, a different commitment. Who knows? Maybe he can make some improvements there, settle down a little bit. But I think that maybe the attention will be on a Gabe Giuliani, somebody that's been in this defense before, someone that has a little bit more experience, even though he was undrafted, can take advantage of the depth issue that is going to exist. They didn't expect L'Jarius Sneed when they brought him in to be someone that they couldn't count on being on the football field. And I think that this is probably a new situation for him to deal with as well, coming over from Kansas City, because, he was a great player there, and they would have wanted that type of talent, that type of ability to bolster the back end of this defense, but it just hasn't happened consistently. So I think it's a problem, one that they're going to have to address either by scheme or, just figuring out who's going to actually rise in this occasion of filling in for a guy that, figured to be huge in their plans this year in 2025, guys.
And Marcus Harris was the 6th round pick, and, people seem to be excited about him out of Cal, but he's also a smaller guy at about 5'11", 190. Is he really a boundary corner? And, is he going to take on the 6'3", 6'4" giants that are playing? Who's going to guard Nico Collins? Who's his matchup if you have Marcus Harris and Roger McCreary and Jarvis Brownlee Jr.? That's a difficult thing to ask those guys who are all a little under 6 foot. So Gabe Giuliani being that 6'1" guy on the outside, he was getting the first team reps at cornerback with Daryl Baker having a shoulder issue at times during the offseason program, according to reports. So maybe it is Gabe Giuliani who could finally take that step forward and make an impact, because they need a boundary guy if Sneed's going to be out, not just another slot guy, unfortunately.
Yeah, if you look at the stats, and I looked it up just kind of for the sake of the segment, 5.5 yards per attempt teams were averaging with Sneed on the field. Without Sneed, it's 7.3 yards per attempt. So there's obviously a clear difference with him. And Brad, when you talked about the interview he gave, was it last month, where he said, I'm as healthy as I've been. Well, if I sprain my ankle and then the next day I'm walking on my ankle after not walking, I'm technically as healthy as I've been within that time period. So the choice of words were very careful there for Mr. Sneed.
Touche.
I guess he can't be wrong on that one.
Well, not just that too. The Titans defense as a whole, their pass rush last year, 34 sacks, which is the 3rd lowest in the NFL. So that's going to have to be another side of the ball, or another aspect of the defense, I should say, that really gets going. What do you think about the pass rush this year, and the fact that also Femi Oladejo is now signed, and we can now breathe a sigh of relief that there's no worry about him not reporting to camp?
Yeah, first off, you got to win the trenches. That's where football is won and lost. And those have been liabilities for this Titans franchise, which is, in my opinion, the reason why you see them struggle. Now, it might sound narcissistic coming from a former offensive lineman, but facts are a stubborn thing. When you give up the most sacks in the league at 29, that's a problem. When you don't get enough sacks and you're at the bottom of the rung, that's a problem. And until they find ways to apply consistent pressure to C.J. Stroud, Danny Dimes, Daniel Jones, or Anthony Richardson, whichever, and, of course, that boy down there in Jacksonville, Trevor Lawrence, it's going to be hard to win the division. So you got to be able to apply pressure, whether it's by having such lockdown covers type situations where the quarterback has to hold onto the football, or he's manically running for his life. And I did see some comments from people, from fans, basically saying, hey, what have they done to address the edges? Guys that have to be in the backfield. We know that Jeffrey Simmons is going to collapse the middle of a pocket, and he demands a double team almost every single snap. But how about giving him some help, some relief? When they double him, that means that somebody else is by themselves on the outside. So let's go ahead and see if we can apply pressure this way, or bringing blitzes, whatever it takes. So that's the way I see it, Tyler. What do you think?
No, I'm with you, B-Hop, and I'll be honest with you. I think the most pessimistic I am about this team this year is when we talk about the pass rush. I just don't see how it would be possible for them to improve enough upon last year for it to make a difference. Like, I think that Jeffrey Simmons can play better. 2 straight seasons, less than 6 sacks. That has to be better. He can make a bigger impact. Still haven't seen that double-digit sack season that I personally been waiting on from Jeffrey Simmons to cement himself as that top 3 interior defensive lineman. I thought he was, it was Aaron Donald, it was Chris Jones, and Jeffrey Simmons was on his way after that 2021 season. He has 2 3-sack games. Sunday night against the Rams, Monday or into the playoff game against the Bengals, he was fully dominant. And I was just waiting for that next step. And I just haven't seen it, honestly. And it's gone the other way. Quite frankly, he's fallen off of that all-pro level play. And I think he's still capable of it. And I love seeing him be in better shape. So that's going to help. But again, he's only one guy. And you look at the edges. And next to him, I think Sebastian Joseph-Day is just such a solid role-playing veteran. But he's not a difference maker. And T'Vondre Sweat had a good pressure rate last year, but even going back to T'Vondre Sweat's tape, one of the things I pointed out when he was drafted is he's a guy who whiffs on sacks a lot. He can get there, and then, it's like a good take, but he doesn't make the layup. Like, he does whiff sometimes on that, so he needs to convert that good pressure rate he had as a rookie nose tackle into more sacks. They can manage there, but on the outside, Arden Key resurrected his career being a third rusher. He was the tertiary rusher in San Francisco. He went to be the third rusher in Jacksonville, and he had success. He has now been moved up by the Titans the last 2 years as the number 1 rusher, and I just don't know if that is his best role in the NFL, and I don't know if he's capable of fulfilling a number 1 rusher role in the NFL for a good pass rush. And then outside of that, maybe Femi goes Javon Curse, and he's a freak 2.0, and he double-digit sacks as a rookie. But remember, Femi was an off-ball linebacker, and that's why I was saying it's so important that they get Femi Oladejo signed before training camp, because more than other second-round picks, Mike Green is ready to rush right now for Baltimore after being a top 15 talent. And the off-field stuff made him drop to the second round, but he went 59. He doesn't maybe need the first 3 days of training camp. Femi Oladejo was an off-ball linebacker for most of his college career. He does need every single rep of training camp possible, because if Femi doesn't explode like Javon Curse did his rookie year, how is this Titans pass rush with Draymond Jones, who I think is better as an interior rusher in nickel packages? Lorenzo Carter had 0 sacks last year for the Falcons and 3 before that. He's an early down edge setter, not a pass rusher in your pass rush rotation. So, where is the edge pressure coming from? It's Femi or bust for the Titans pass rush, and I just think that's too much pressure for a guy who is a developmental pick who played a different position in college. We're just asking for a miracle here. And I think the Titans pass rush is going to be bad once again, and it's going to lead to, disappointment, I guess, for people. If I had to pick one thing where I'm like, this is going to ruin the team, it's the pass rush just isn't there. So full circle, when we talked earlier about the backup quarterback thing, and I said, hey, I'd rather lose those games. Give me those 5 draft spots, because it's a great edge rush class with Ruben Bain and TJ Parker from Clemson and other guys out there who are going to rise. They need the pass rush so bad. It's so bad right now if you're honest with yourself.
What's a realistic, I guess, year for Femi then, given the still adjusting to the position switch and obviously upping a level into the NFL from college? What would you say is a realistic season for him?
He's going to get the reps. Let's just say that, because there isn't a proven dude on the edge. He's going to get the opportunities to get out there on the field in that 3-4 defense and make some hay. You just mentioned, first off, their leading sacker, Harold Landry from last year, got stolen by Mike Vrabel. Arden Key was second on the roster with 6.5 sacks. I think that's what his number was.
Great pressure rate, though. Everyone loves pointing that out. His pressure rate was great. Okay, 6.5 sacks. Great pressure rate.
Yeah, but that's almost along the lines of what Julian was saying about T'Vondre. He gets back there, but can he bring a guy down? But then again, being disruptive also helps too. Maybe speeding up the quarterback's clock, making him throw into errors, throw into coverage, creating those turnovers. That also is effective as well. But you got to be able to, to make good on those opportunities. But I think Femi definitely will have the chance to show as a second round pick that, hey, look, I'm especially supposed to be on this football field. Second round pick is no slouch now. Okay.
Right.
So we put a lot of attention on first rounders and a lot of expectation that comes along with that, and rightfully so. But a second rounder, man, he's right in that conversation about guys that need to make an impact. And I'm going back to my draft in 1993. Michael Barrow was the second pick that we took out of the U. And that dude came in and was a playmaker. As a rookie, he made an immediate impact. So I would expect that they have the same kind of expectation for Femi to come in and make some good in a situation, Tyler, admittedly, like what you're saying, could be pretty bleak looking at this point.
You know what? I do want to give something tangible that I'm looking for from Femi. I want to see him accomplish this. I want him to overtake Lorenzo Carter as the early down edge setter. Carter is 6'5", 260. The Titans had a terrible time setting an edge last year. I remember Mike Vrabel, he had a great term that I'd never heard before, that edge, wall, swarm. That was his run defense philosophy. We set the edge, we wall up, and then we swarm the ball carrier. And when I heard that, I was like, man, that's great coach talk right there. Like, that's just a great way to explain that. My dad was a coach for Pee Wee football and middle school and stuff, but like, it still rings when you hear something, you're like, man, that's how you teach kids football, is little things like that stick with them, and it stuck with me. And the Titans didn't do step one, so the run defense fell apart at times last year, and they gave up, franchise high in rushing yards to the Colts, which was an embarrassment. It was bad linebacker play, though, if we want to go look at the film. But at the end of the day, if Femi can be that early down edge setter, look, he needs his pass rush moves to develop. He's got to work on his hand work and his counters. And like the outside linebacker coach was saying in the mandatory minicamp interviews, we got to have 1 or 2 power. We got to have 1 or 2 speed. And then after that, once we get those down, we can have 1 or 2 counters off them. And that's all that you need. Well, that'll come in time, and that'll take time to develop. He needs massive reps there. But you know what he can do on day one? Be 6'3", 260 pounds, and a guy who flies off the dang ball. And he can smack you in the mouth, set a physical edge, defend the run, chase down ball carriers with his linebacker mentality that he had. I can't wait to see him just be a physical freak and wreck the line of scrimmage. And I think that'll be more effective early in run defense. So let Femi be that. If Draymond Jones comes in as the pass rusher on the edge across from Arden Key, and then you got Sweat and SJD rotating next to Simmons, and that's your 4 pass rush guys early on in the season, man, that's perfectly fine with me. Let Femi come along in the pass rush, but early downs, first, second down, he should be out there right away, wrecking that edge and setting it hard with the physical gifts that he does have that can translate right now. I want to see that, and I think if he can be the early down starter by the end of the season, I think that's a big success for a guy who needs development.
Real quick, Julian, there's no problem with dialing up pressure either. You know what I'm saying? If we see some Amani Hooker, if we see some guys down in the box, that are playing in these coverage situations, if we're looking to, drop dudes off in the fire zone type situation and try and create some sort of confusion for a quarterback, there's nothing wrong with that. And as a matter of fact, that's probably what will be the thing that they fall back on. If you just can't get there, it'd be great like what we saw in last year's Super Bowl, where you can rush 4 dudes and just wreak havoc. But that's not the luxury that most teams have, and certainly not on this one. So unless you see somebody step up and emerge to be the dude that needs to be blocked single-handedly by himself, you're going to have to be smart. You're going to have to Denard Wilson's going to have to dial up some stuff that can really be problematic for the offenses they're going to face this year.
That's
Tyler,
why I think they need to add some people. That I would consider. Listen, I know that 2020 didn't go well and some fans are sour, but Jadeveon Clowney had 9.5 sacks with the Baltimore Ravens, with Denard Wilson on staff just 2 years ago. He's a free agent right now. I think that could help put him in a limited role. He's not going to get paid what he got paid in 2020. I know that some Titans fans didn't like the 9-game experience, but that's a veteran who could help this group in the pass rush area and also be another big physical guy who fits the mold that they're looking for now.
Tyler, I know you weren't a big fan of the defensive front last year, but we'll always have the Tavondre Sweat fumble recovery.
Yes, we will.
We'll always have at least that. So, all right, after the break, we're going to talk about maybe some position groups that we have missed and what each of us, a position group that each of us has an eye on when the Locked On Titans squad show returns. Stay with us. All right, summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. Now, you're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling with FanDuel? You can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. FanDuel, it's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, guys, so we've talked about the QBs. We've talked about receivers. We've talked about the defensive front and the secondary. Are there any other position groups that you guys have an eye on when it comes to battles that you're looking forward to as camp gets underway?
Well, it's obviously for me. I don't need to go any much further than you're right, Tyler. Come on, man. Where they needed to show the most improvement is where up front. Yeah, they need to be able to show that they can protect the quarterback, and particularly a brand new quarterback. They don't need Cam Ward running for his life. They don't need to impede his development by having him watching the rush constantly versus the routes downfield. Of course, he needs to be able to adjust the protection and do the things that most quarterbacks are able to do consistently. But for the most part, bringing in Dan Moore to play left tackle, moving JC over to what may be a more natural position at right tackle, let Peter Skoronski develop as he's continued to do since the first pick of the 23 draft. Lloyd Cushenberry, I thought, was a great acquisition last year until the injuries took him off the field. Now I'm also hearing he might be on the pup to start camp as well. But if he can get healthy, Kevin Zeitler might be the steal of this year's free agency. That cat's a baller from Detroit, and he's seen a lot of success, right? So I think that there's a lot of expectation that this current iteration of the Titans offensive line is vastly improved because they're going to need to be. You're not only going to need to protect the quarterback, like I just mentioned, but they're also going to need to be very capable of opening holes for Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears, because no one wants to be in passing down situations out of necessity. You want to be able to have and take those shots downfield and protect the quarterback in the pass game because you're taking advantage of opportunities, not because you're dealing with third and forever. You see, so they've got to be able to run block as well. So don't go any further than the offensive line for me, guys.
No, 100% right. I'm with you there. I was going to go there if you didn't, but I thought, maybe B-Hop might be better suited for that one. I'll let him take that one first. No, I'm going to go off the board just a little bit here from, we could talk. I really like tight end, linebacker is interesting, but special teams, guys. Special teams isn't fun to talk about. It's not fun to talk about who's going to be the starting gunner, who's the starting L3 this year. It's not fun to talk about. As a former punt up back, though, I got to show love to special teams. Like I got to. They need to not only just not be god-awful in special teams, but they need to be good. How long has it been since a Titans team, even with the Mike Vrabel Titans, who were the second best version of the team maybe throughout their special teams was never a major asset. It was always, let's hope it doesn't kill us. Let's hope the field goal maker makes it. It's always, can we survive? I'm tired of surviving, guys. I want to thrive, all right? I want to thrive. Okay, so you bring in Bones Fossil, who some consider, the best special teams coach in the NFL. You bring in his guys, Johnny Hecker, who's it's funny, they go from a power punter with no accuracy to an accuracy punter who's losing power, and an older kicker without the power but great accuracy to a kicker with a massive leg, and the accuracy is a little questionable. They totally flipped their philosophy because that's what Bones Fossil wanted to do. They've drafted guys who they think are going to help on special teams, like Kalel Mullings from Michigan in the 7th round. They bring in James Prochet and some of these other guys who are maybe dedicated returners, in my opinion. If they are truly dedicated to fixing special teams this year, it could make a major difference. Because I would say special teams solely lost them multiple games last year. Detroit, for certain, where they gave up, 362 special teams yards. That was an embarrassment. But the block punts, everybody remembers Levis. But those Levis mistakes were paired with blocked punts against the Jets and the Bears. So, special teams was as big of a disaster as the quarterback position last year, it's not as fun to talk about, but it must be corrected, and it must not only not be bad, it needs to be good.
B-Hop, I figured you'd pick offensive line, and Tyler, you're a football sicko, so somehow I figure you might pick something special. So I'm going to go with the tight ends here. I think a lot of people at least are excited about Gunnar Helm and maybe prematurely putting him in the tight end 1 spot, at least
we're going to have to fight.
For what is that you, Tyler?
Yes, I'm the one.
Well, he had a great final season there at Texas, but I don't know if that's enough. Right. I still think it's Chig's job to lose, basically. I think he had inconsistencies have been an issue with Chig. He had that stretch of 3 games last year where I think it was like 22 catches or something like that over that 3-game stretch. However, I do think the athleticism of Chig is there. This is his first year with the Titans that he's going to have the same offensive coordinator, Nick Coles and Brian Callahan. So I do think that'll help. And if you've watched Cam Ward in practice, he lives on those short intermediate throws, like right over the middle. That's his safe spot. That's kind of his bread and butter. And I think that bodes well for a Chig breakout season. I know he had, just under 500 yards last year. I think we might go over that this year. And I know he and Cam have been working out in Miami together. So I think that though Gunnar, I think, could be a tight end one day, and I think he is a cornerstone piece. Obviously, you draft him this year. I think that's the future plans. I do think this year, at least for right now, that it's Chig's job to lose, and I think he's going to have a pretty good season.
I agree with both those things. I agree that it's his job to lose, and I agree he's going to have a good season. I think there's a world where Chig Okonkwo has better statistics than Gunnar Helm, but Gunnar Helm plays more snaps. I go back to Brian Callahan's offensive philosophy and the tight end usage in Cincinnati, where they've had guys like Hayden Hurst and Mike Gesicki. I think Brian Callahan wants to be in 3 wide receiver. I think that's where that's his night robe. He could put on his jeans and his t-shirt and his 2 tight end sets, to make his dad happy, to run those power gap scheme runs. But I think when Brian Callahan goes to bed at night, he throws on his 11 robe and he goes out there with 3 wide receivers. And I think having a tight end with more size, Chig Okonkwo, he's just never lived up to, I wouldn't even say lived up to, he's just never become the blocker that he needs to be a consistent tight end 1. He's just not big enough. He's an athletic tight end who I think Delaney Walker back in San Francisco days, I think that sort of role was where Chig Okonkwo would fit best. And I think Gunnar Helm being 6'5", 250, having a better chance to be in line next to the offensive tackle. You need to be able to execute double teams at the line of scrimmage and get movement in Brian Callahan and Bill Callahan's run game. Like, look at the tape last year and you see the tight end has to be able to crash down and do that. They want to run those backside pulls where they bring the guard through and then they bring the tight end from the backside to kick out that defensive end. You got to have a little bit of girth, and Chig Okonkwo was not very good at that stuff last year. So if they want to execute those gap scheme runs and those backside pullers and some of those double teams at the line of scrimmage, it's hard to do that with a 6'2", 230-pound guy like Chig Okonkwo. So he can be explosive and he can have better statistics. I just think Gunnar Helm stylistically fits better in a 3 wide receiver set because he can do more as a blocker.
I dig where you're going with that, Tyler, but not everybody has the luxury of having a Travis Kelce, a guy that can block because he has that size, but it's also
George Kittle,
a vertical threat.
It's hard.
Right, I dig that. But Chig Okonkwo is more of Jonnu Smith than anything else. Very versatile. Sometimes you can put him in a slot. You can put hands on people. He's not a small dude, 235, 238 pounds. Ain't no slouch. But I think they like his versatility. Now, unless you're talking about committing to the run to where you need that 6th blocker on the line, that's maybe where Gunnar Helm can actually make some strides. But we also had a couple of tandems back in the day when we had Frank Wycheck, who wasn't the best, most effective blocker in the world. Aaron Kinney was definitely a better inline blocker than he was. But we know how pivotal Frank Wycheck's role was of being a versatile utility guy that looked more like a fullback sometimes, could be a slot receiver sometimes, could be at the end of the line standing next to me so I can yell at him sometimes. He's a very versatile guy. But, I understand in certain situations, in certain instances, you want to give that appearance that, hey, look, we're going to run the ball right down your throat because we got more blockers than you do people to stop us from blocking. But they can also show themselves to be a threat, detaching themselves from an offensive line and making a play or two in the underneath stuff that then eventually opens up the routes for Calvin Ridley and for Tyler Lockett and company.
Yeah.
So
I would say that I think some of this goes to my personal football philosophy. So later in the season, we can have some of these discussions, but a lot of people like wide receivers that are separators because they're going to separate. They're going to get, well, for me, I'm like, what happens when the defense calls the perfect play and you can't separate? You're running that deep crossing route and the guy playing man on you drops off and the robber comes down and now he takes you in man and you made separation across the field, but now you're not open because the defense won the play schematically. Can I get you the ball? Can you still win a one-on-one matchup? If I throw it to you, can you go up and get it? And Gunnar Helm is going to do that more than Chigakonkwo, and I think that helps Cam Ward when things get tight. Hey, I can throw the ball up to you, and you'll go get it. So some of my just personal football philosophy on what I want out of my players and what I like may have to do with that, but I will say to counter myself, Mike Borgonzi, Titans general manager, spoke this all season and said, hey, like what you said, B-Hop, there aren't a lot of George Kittles out there. There aren't a lot of Mark Andrews that can block and be a receiver. Most tight end rooms in the NFL are kind of a rotation now, like how we view running back by committee. It's like tight end by committee. So it's really hard to find that pure tight end one that does everything well. So if that's difficult to do, then that's probably not the Titans' plan anyway. And if it's not their plan, then they probably could play Chigakonkwo more. So I guess we'll have to see it play out. But I see both sides. I'm just going to go with Gunnar Helm because I like that bigger classic Y tight end with his hand in the dirt.
Do you owe him money or something, Tyler?
Not yet. If he does well, though, I might because people are going to be excited.
I think that's the perfect place to stop, at least for today. Obviously, the Titans kick off training camp tomorrow. We are here at the Titans Squad show twice a week. I think tentatively at least Tuesday and Friday, but we'll see for the audience out there that's listening. The schedule may change depending on what the practice schedules and everything are, things how they go out there. But wanted to thank everybody for listening. Remember, you can listen to the Locked On Titans podcast with Tyler Rowland every single day. They are on the Locked On Network, wherever you get your podcast. You can also get the Titans Squad show as well right here on the Locked On Network. So thanks, guys. See you next time.